Going to live now.
Good evening, members. Welcome to the District Planning meeting on Thursday, the 25th of June 2026. My name is Councillor Ron Pratt and I am the chairman for this meeting. Members, I've already said on an email, but if anyone wants to take their jacket off, then please do. You know, we are working under extreme temperatures in here. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. During each item, please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. Could I ask members to avoid approaching the top table, as this could create interference with the cameras and the live stream. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of the microphones. Therefore, can I ask that when invited to speak, you remember to turn on your microphones and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. We don't have any fire alarm testing scheduled for today. However, we may have periodic fire alarms, and I remind members to ensure they sign in and out when entering the council offices. We did ask the clerks to take that out. I'm sorry, but I think if we've tagged in, you only have to tag out, don't you? We don't sign in anymore. If you hear the fire alarms, please exit using either of the two marked fire escape routes. Once out of the building, please proceed to the designated muster point located on the grass verge by the police station entrance. Can I also suggest that we consider taking a 5-minute hydration break? I thought if the World Cup players can do it, then perhaps we should too. So after each planning item, perhaps I'll sort of ask the room, if you want a 5-minute break, we'll adjourn. The other thing that's new, it's been suggested to me that we actually introduce the top table. So Mr. Johnson, could we start with you and work down the table to say who you are and why you're here?
Thank you for the introduction, Chair. I'm Michael Johnson. I'm the Head of Development Management and Enforcement for Maldon District Council. And I'm here supporting the officer's recommendation on the applications that you have before you. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Mark Jaggard. I'm Director of Planning, Place and Growth at the Council.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Maddie Thompson, Vice Chairman of the committee.
Ms. Baden.
Good evening, everyone. Liz Beaton, Development Management Team Leader into week 3 at Maldon. It's nice to meet you.
Good evening, Gareth Ball, Principal Planning Officer and the Presenting Officer for Agenda Items 5 and 6.
Chris Purvis, Development Management Team Leader, and I'll be presenting item 7 this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Chairman, could I ask them to speak up? With all the fans, your voices aren't travelling, and we've got members of the public who most probably would like to hear you just as well as that I would. Thank you.
Speak up. Item 2, apologies for absence. Do we have any abs? I have a list here, but are there any others?
Yes, Chair, so we've received apologies for absence from Councillors Bassinger, Bown, Durham, Jennings, Siddle, Swindle and White.
Thank you. Thank you. Item 3, it is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of February 2026, found on pages 7 to 16, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Thompson. Can I take that from assent? Everybody happy? Thank you. Item 4 is declarations of interest to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to terms of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members, you are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interest as soon as they become aware, should the need arise throughout the meeting. There are none. We move to item 5, found on pages 17 to 78. Mr. Ball, I think this is, you volunteered to do this?
Indeed, if we just wait for the presentation. Yeah. Well, this one, it's just up there. They've got a share of them there, I think. Well, this will just work with that one, won't it? Oh, is that? Okay.
You scroll as you go.
Yeah. Where's the full screen?
You can see it on there.
Am I blind? Where's full screen? I think it's F11, no? No. Is there any way we can get this full screen, or?
There's a little icon in the taskbar.
Whereabouts is that?
If you go to view,
There you go, Control L. Okay, great stuff. Brilliant. Okay, yeah, thanks members. So this is item 5 on the agenda, which is the application at land opposite Prentice Hall Farm of Prentice Hall Lane. The application is outline, so the matters up for consideration don't include appearance, landscaping, layout and scale, which are reserved matters. Application proposes up to 200 dwellings, 40% of which be affordable, with unit sizes and tenure mix to comply with the local housing needs assessment. The application is being presented to committee as a departure because it lies outside the settlement boundary, and we have 658 objections on the application. This is an old presentation. Is there, bear with me 2 seconds. Bear with me, I might be able to just drop it in the chat. Sorry, I thought when you update it in the... Yeah, good thinking. Shall I drop this one in first? Last thing we need in the heat. Yeah, I'll go PDF. So it should be that one.
district chat. Well, that's why it's funny about it.
I may as well start with the verbal addendum to the report. So members will be aware there was a, here we go. Excellent, great stuff. So there's a verbal addendum in addition to the written addendum to the report. There's a few things to raise. A few additional typos that have been brought to my attention and a few larger bits that I'll pop on screen. So at one point I've referenced bus stop improvements in relation to the £600,000 financial obligation. That's meant to be bus service improvements. There's been a change to that relevant condition as well, where it was pointed out to me that the changes to the bus stop might be near a conservation area. So we've just tweaked that recommended condition so that those details need to be submitted to the planning authority to assess the impact on any heritage assets. Wrong mouse. A slight change to the recommendation where in order to bring development forward sooner, recommendation B is subject to Section 106 being completed within 3 months instead of 6 months, although that is subject to extensions of time if needed, if the RPA considers that reasonable. And one more major one, I realise in my report a slight procedural error. The way it works with heritage harm is you have to do essentially a planning balance of just the heritage harm before you move to the overall planning balance, which my report didn't have in it. But obviously, if I've recommended approval on the planning balance with all of the harms, then it can be reasonably assumed that that was going to be the outcome. So it was very low level of less than substantial harm to a grade 2 listed asset, and obviously I conclude that the benefits outweigh that harm. Other than that, just to clarify, the Tollesbury neighbourhood plan has been submitted informally, but we haven't had the Reg 15 submission yet, so that isn't a consideration today. Just two more. It was flagged that the officer's report in the addressing public representations didn't flag where the responses were to the sustainability of the site. So they're in paragraphs 511.11 to 511.17. And then finally, just to clarify, paragraph 3.1.11, access is not a reserved matter. Its appearance, like I just touched on, that is just a typo from me. So moving on to the application, you'll see the site there in red, just to the southwest of Tollesbury. A wide view, you'll see around it, largely open countryside. Tolles St Darcy is up here, connected by Tollesbury Road. We've got River Blackwater down there, and the Blackwater Estuary National Nature Reserve in the northeast. Zooming into the slide slightly, you'll see it's just over 18 hectares area. It's bounded by West Street to the north, Prentice Hall Lane running down the west, the Victory Recreation Ground to the east, and then the cemetery falls within the site, which it wraps around. I popped two little yellow dots on there, which are the entrance points, and then a little arrow. So if you look at that one to the right first, that's a view from that point coming off Elysian Gardens and St John's Close into the site. And then going back to that one over to the west, that's a view. I did have to use Google Maps because I couldn't get out of the car. That's a view from approximately where that entrance point would be into the site. A few other views. So this is from the top one's from the southwest of the site looking inwards. And the bottom one there is further distance. You can see in the bottom here down to the southwest looking towards the site. A view into the cemetery from West Street at the top. And at the bottom, there's a view towards the wider site and cemetery from the public right-of-way footpath 8, which features quite heavily in considerations. So that's the site, just in terms of the constraints. The black line there is the settlement boundary. You can see we fall outside it in the open countryside. The brown area is the conservation area. And then just down to the southwest of the site here is that Grade 2 listed heritage asset that I mentioned earlier. And then the footpath 8 runs, annoyingly I put a red line over it, but it runs along here, up through the site there, and then across the top to connect back into Tollesbury there. So the application itself, because it's outlined, we don't have detailed plans at this stage. As always, well, as usually, we've got parameter plans which essentially set the sort of framework for the reserve matters. So this is the land use parameter plan. Everything in green will be green infrastructure, so SANG, the play areas, any attenuation basins, and then the sort of beige ochre area is the built area, so all the houses, roads and private gardens to the houses. There's 9.85 hectares of green space that's proposed. That includes the SANG to offset the impacts on European protected sites. You'll see the western side of the site is largely open, with the development concentrated in the east, closer to Tollesbury. Access and movement parameter plan, just to show you the roads internally, and I'm not sure how well you can see, but that shows the points which the applicant is proposing to punch through onto that public right-of-way to the south. As I say, while it is outlined, this is an indicative master plan, so we're not giving weight to this plan. This plan won't be secured, but obviously it's submitted just to show the development can be held within the site. So you can see there you've got the SANG area over in the west, you've got allotments and informal play. These blue areas are the attenuation basins for drainage. The green corridor running through the site, with that central area there being the local equipped area of play and the main green space within the site. And you can see, this one you can see Prow footpath 8 coming through the site properly there. And then obviously the white blocks is an indicative housing layout. Here I've put in quite a few slides. Some of them are just things maybe people want to come back to later, but there I've tried to drop in the site next to the sort of overall view there. So zooming out to an aerial view. So just to clarify, north is going towards the bottom left. So that's West Street coming along into Tollesbury, and this is the application site. That red dot is the main point of entry proposed. And then if I take that away, you can see that development there sitting within the wider area of Tollesbury. In terms of landscape, obviously we had an LVIA was done and was reviewed externally, which informed officers' report. There are a few impacts. There are 4 impacts that I sort of drew out a bit more in the report, which were the more serious impacts. So users along West Street, footpath 8, footpath 25, which is significantly to the south on the coast, and then people visiting the cemetery. So I've tried to use that other one just to indicate roughly where those areas are. So the red line is footpath 8 there, cemetery, and then road users coming in off West Street in the blue line there. And then I've got a couple of views from the LVIA just to show the development. So there at the top, you'll see a view from the northwest, just off West Street, as existing at the top, and then down below is a proposed. Again, with this, it's not too bad on there. Again, with this, the actual housing blocks are indicative. What that red line represents is essentially the absolute sort of net of what is potentially permissible under the building heights parameter plan, which can be a little bit misleading because obviously if something is nearer to the camera, then it will look far larger on here. But the housing layout gives you a fairly decent idea of what the impact will be. So that first one was year 1, and then at the bottom now we have year 15 after the proposed landscaping has matured. So again, this is a view from footpath 8 looking northwards into the site. You can see those existing houses on West Street, just on that western edge of Tollesbury there, and then indicative proposed development. Here, this is footpath 25, so this is just to give an idea. This one, obviously, because that footpath has higher sensitivity due to it being obviously a high quality public walking area, we did identify a higher level of harm. However, as you can see, the actual change is quite difficult to see there. So I sort of pointed out here that it's a high sensitivity due to the quality of that walk. You can't really see, but yeah, essentially the impact is fairly small. It's just that with it being such a highly sensitive place, there is impact there. And you can see that essentially there'll be buildings visible across some of those trees there. And that's without the landscaping at year 15. And then finally, a view from across the other side of the river from St. Lawrence. This is about 4 kilometers from the site, just to sort of show, and this isn't a verified view. So this is essentially an image I've drawn out from the design and access statement, but gives an idea of how sort of well the development would sit within the existing tree line and buildings. In terms of the access, there's a site to the north as well. Actually, if I flip this one first, it probably makes more sense. The site we're considering today is in yellow there. There are a few other sites live in Tollesbury at the moment. So there's a site directly to the north, up to 159 units, a site off Mel Road in the southeast, and then there's a smaller site off North Road for 24 units. So just this interaction here between the yellow and red, both had previous applications that they withdrew for several issues. That was in a stage without 5-year housing land supply. And one of the main issues was both access points came off West Street at the same point. So the applicant for this application has moved theirs westwards. So there's no conflict there and highways are satisfied with that. And then you can see there, probably not that well, but a footway would be put in to connect up to the pavement within Tollesbury. There I've just tried to drop both developments in roughly just to show how they sit. Another clarification, so you'll see from the report that we do have a holding objection from Place Services Ecology. There are obviously a whole host of issues that they consider on their site. There are 2 that have an outstanding holding objection from them, which is great crested newts and skylarks. So on the first one, you'll see I've recommended conditions for both of those matters in the report. The first one in relation to great crested newts, GCNs, it's to do with the district license, which essentially permits them to carry out works in an area where there may be newts. I understand that it's very close to being countersigned and completed and sent across. I've discharged conditions myself on other applications in this district where that was applied as a condition. So as an officer, I'm recommending an approval with that as a condition. And the same with skylarks. It was recommended that we have an outline strategy for mitigation. There are 2 pairs of skylarks over in the west of the site, near where the circular walking route is being proposed. So again, I'm recommending that's done by condition. So that's conditions 39 and 40. Take us through to the planning balance. I thought this might be a bit helpful to just set it all out. So the harms that officers have identified are on the left there, and then the benefits on the right. Just at the bottom in bold, I'll just remind that because we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, the NPPF directs us to grant permission unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. So for the harms outside the settlement boundary, I've given that limited weight due to us not having a 5-year housing land supply, which is in line with all the appeal decisions we've been receiving. Obviously, there's the major / moderate adverse landscape effects and the major moderate visual effects, which I've given significant harm. The loss of agricultural land, limited, which also reflects recent appeal decisions, and then limited harm to that very low level of less than substantial harm to the Grade 2 listed building. In the benefits, obviously, you've got the delivery of homes, including affordable homes, and the new communal open space and social benefits. I've given both significant weight. And then you have job creation, use of local facilities in terms of improving the viability of those facilities, moderate weight. And then in environmental, I've given significant weight because the applicant's gone way over and above the 10% mandatory biodiversity net gain by proposing 49.15% on-site biodiversity net gain. And then they're creating just under 10 hectares of green space, which will be accessible to the wider public, improving pedestrian links, moderate weight, and then in terms of sustainable construction, sustainable materials and resourcing, I've given that moderate weight. So that's essentially how it's shaken down within the planning balance, and therefore I'm recommending that planning permission is granted subject to the conditions and planning obligations within the Section 106 agreement as detailed in Section 8 of the committee report. Thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. We have public participants for this planning application in line with the public participation scheme. Sorry? Councillor Cyril Norman, did you have a point? Thank you. Yeah. We have an objector, Mr. Gilbert. We have a representative from the Parish Council, Councillor Clare, and we have the applicant, Mr. Ben Johnson. So could I ask Mr. Gilbert, if you could find a chair. I think there's one there. I think you know the rules. There's a 2-minute timer that comes up on the screen. When you start speaking, you have 2 minutes, sir. Good evening.
Chair and members, Tollesbury is a remote and rural village surrounded by water on 3 sides, loved by its community for its unique character and heritage. The planner's report shows 658 objectors from residents, not NIMBYs and blockers. These are residents that voted for you. Tollesbury currently has 4 developments awaiting determination, totaling 536 houses, all on farmland, brought about by a change in targets that is punishing rural communities, creating misery and anxiety. Tollesbury is defined as a larger village in your rural facility surveys in 2023. Since then, shops have closed and reduced their hours. We have more houses and fewer shops. We are less sustainable. Councillors have been squeezed into a corner by policy, so now you have to choose which development is the least worst effect on the lives in your district, instead of planning to make lives better. In this council meeting on the 17th of June 25, you discussed the growth options for the district, how modelling and testing of the infrastructure will be carried out so you could plan growth and shape the district. What has happened since? In that meeting, one councillor said the residents have been repeatedly let down. The Minister of Housing statement in December 24 said that with a sequential approach, higher performing land should be protected from this form of release. The proposed site is high performing agricultural land verified by the Soil Society. We should be encouraging food security, not destroying it. The suggested mitigation measures in this report will disperse the community. Busing primary school children to other villages will not integrate this development with the Tollesbury community. The report states that the bus service generally runs every 30 minutes. That is misleading. The planner's report 5/11/17 said there is a reliance on private motor vehicle trips which the applicant cannot fully address. Therefore, this is contrary to NPPF paragraph 77. We have already had development of 25 houses with over 20 unsold in nearly 2 years and over 50 houses on sale in a slow market. Tollesbury does not need 200 more houses so that the 5-year land supply is protected from the district from speculative developers and land bankers. Do not sacrifice Tollesbury to meet a target. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clare, would you like to take a seat? Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Chairman and
Whenever
members.
you're ready, sir. The clock will start.
In a detailed written submission that is on the public record, Tollesbury Parish Council has already rejected this application. We still do. If it goes ahead, however, there are two things. 3 other large developments awaiting a decision must be reconsulted, as the figures and assumptions for those will no longer be valid. The service is even less able to cope. Secondly, conditions must include Section 106 investment in existing community spaces, provision for young people, and toilets at Woodett Pool, which is a district-wide asset. For context, the applicant's consultation with the village was cursory. The site lies outside the development boundary in a sensitive coastal landscape. Building there would mean loss of agricultural land, harm to biodiversity, and damage to the character of our historic village. Development on that scale will increase car dependency, harm and place further strain on local roads and also the character of our village. In scores of letters of objection, residents have made clear their opposition to the scale of this development. They're establishing a community land trust to provide genuinely affordable homes for local people. In our draft neighbourhood plan, Tollesbury supports the right development, smaller, phased, and aligned with infrastructure. This application is not it. It is overdevelopment. Chairman, the environmental harm would be permanent. We urge you to decline this application, adopt recommendation B. And thank you for allowing the Parish Council to make this point. I'm doing so on behalf of Councillor Sarah Hawes, our chairman, who's away on business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clown. Now we have the applicant, Mr. Ben Johnson, an early bird.
Good evening, councillors. It is good to see you again after meeting with you last September to discuss these proposals. This outline planning application now before you helps address the council's housing need. As of the 1st of April, there were 730 active applicant households on the Gateway to Home Choice Housing Register and 55 households in temporary accommodation. These are local people and families waiting for a suitable, secure home. With average typical waiting times of 2.5 years for a social or affordable rented home, this proposal of up to 200 new homes, including 80 affordable new homes, is an important contribution in supporting those families locally in need. Although this is an outline application, it establishes the principle of development and is supported by parameter plans. The safeguard of strict conditions and legal Section 106 obligations imposed by your officers also ensures you as the council have the ultimate control on a reserved matters application that holds true to the high quality proposals presented here before you tonight. The proposal includes 9.85 hectares of green infrastructure, which equates to almost 14 full-size football pitches. The layout of these new homes has also been designed so that high quality landscaping is not an afterthought, but an integral part of the scheme. Importantly, statutory consultees have raised no objection to this application. Although allowing new homes to come forward generates funding to improve existing services under pressure and create new infrastructure to support sustainable growth. The scheme provides over £2.5 million towards healthcare, education, bus services and improvements. While outline planning permission is not of itself a guarantee of delivery, national guidance is clear that major outline schemes can form part of the Council's 5-year housing land supply, where there is clear evidence that completions will begin within 5 years. This application is therefore capable of contributing to Maldon's housing land supply, and I urge members to support their office's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Members, I think Councillor Cyril Norman wanted to speak earlier. So do you want to go first?
Yes. It's page 20 and 21. It says here, the applicant suggests it's likely that a number of the homes could be brought forward within the next 5-year period. What I'm asking is, how likely? Because we need the affordable housing now. So I would like to have some indication as to how likely it will be. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult to give an exact timescale because, you know, national policy and guidance is clear that we can't put a backstop on anything. We can't require developments to be built out in full or put any timelines on that. So essentially, I think it's 3 years on the outline consent for the submission of the reserved matters. And then it'll be 2 years from the submission of the reserved matters where implementation is required. So, I mean, the longest period that there could be before it's implemented would be 5 years from the day of permission if it was granted.
Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some points to make about the landscape, but if I could just ask a question first, because the developer has just referred to provision of temporary accommodation. Am I right in thinking there would be no guarantee that this would include any temporary accommodation, please? Thank you.
Temporary accommodation in what way? In terms of short-term lets or?
Sorry, no, I meant for residents who perhaps are fleeing domestic abuse or for whatever reason the council has taken on a duty to provide them a temporary accommodation. Thank you.
I mean, it's a question for housing, who unfortunately we don't have here, but I mean, the way it works is usually they'll allocate housing to those in the highest need on the register. So, I mean, I don't think we can guarantee, but obviously when they are in temporary accommodation, they're higher up the need. And I know that from speaking to John Sawers in housing the other day, a lot of that, I believe, are 3 beds and sort of larger homes, which are, you know, more commonly brought forward on some of these greenfield sites. But I can't give a guarantee. But obviously, the fact that this would provide up to 80 affordable units if they built out the full 200, it would go some way to achieving that.
Thank you. I mean, my understanding is that those affordable units would be allocated to whoever is next on the list in the relevant band. I don't think that registered providers have to keep any accommodation empty on the off chance that somebody might need it temporarily. So that duty generally falls to the council, not to the registered providers. And I don't think there's any plan for the council to have any of these properties. I don't know if anyone else on the panel can advise on that.
Sorry, I'm with you now. Yes, correct. I don't believe that there is any intention for that now.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I think some...
I was going to agree with Mr. Bull. The idea would be, or the proposal in front of us, is a scheme of 200 homes, of which a policy compliant affordable housing scheme, which is 40% and the 80 units, which is obviously the split between shared ownership and homes for rent. And they would go to a registered provider because the council isn't a stock retention authority and we don't have an HRA, but we work closely with our housing associations.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Sorry, I just switched off the fan. I'll put it back on again because I couldn't quite hear you. Well, as a member of Maldon's strategic housing group, I can certainly see the merits of the affordable housing, albeit I don't think it will provide any temporary accommodation. However, it's the visibility of the site within this valuable landscape that really gives me pause for thought. I'd like to commend Mr. Ball for his clear and comprehensive report, but I would like to draw out some points for members' consideration, particularly relating to landscape. So in Mr. Ball's report on page 28, 5.6.12 states that the landscape has a high to medium level of sensitivity to the changes that this development would bring. Also on page 28, section 5.6.13 states that the development would affect people adversely if walking on footpath 8 with a major to moderate impact. Now that doesn't mention the England coastal path on the opposite side of the estuary at St Lawrence Bay, or people who are in the river, on the river, using the river. The applicant's own landscape visibility impact assessment shows no cross-sectional diagram to show the real visibility of the development from the estuary and from St Lawrence. It does include a map, the Zones of Theoretical Visibility map, which shows the estuary, most of the estuary and St Lawrence in red because a greater proportion of the site will be visible from there. Having driven down to St Lawrence to take a closer look myself, I think it will be fully visible And I think Mr. Ball did just mention that the photo he showed wasn't validated, and I don't have a photo that's validated, but standing there at St. Lawrence, I could see the site quite plainly. On page 29 of Mr. Ball's report, section 5615 looks at how planting might reduce the impacts. And officers and the developer both find that the magnitude of the effects on the landscape cannot be mitigated below a major to moderate level. Now, turning now to the landscape visibility impact assessment itself. So this is the applicant's own document, which you won't find in your pack, but it's referred to in the pack, and I've read the LVIA. I've got a few issues with this. It refers to the Essex Landscape Character Assessment of 2003, but finds that because that's quite old, it's out of scope. Well, I don't agree with that. Prentice Hall landscape hasn't changed much in 23 years. It's a landscape. It doesn't change in 23 years. So the Essex Landscape Character Assessment is surely still applicable. And in any case, the LVIA states that the landscape remains a material consideration in planning terms. Now, this is the applicant's own document stating that the landscape remains a material consideration in planning terms. Staying with the landscape assessment, it also refers to the local character assessment of Tollesbury coastal farmland. And this document states, the objectives for this area are to conserve and restore the landscape, and that we should conserve and enhance the landscape setting of Tollesbury and other villages. And this development does none of that. The local character assessment of Tollesbury coastal farmland also states, the open nature of the skyline of the coastal farmland is visually sensitive, including to new development. And this area is considered to display a moderate to high sensitivity to change. This would seem to me to be of the utmost importance. We're the custodians of landscapes like this, and I think we shouldn't be lining the Blackwater estuary coasts with built form. To sum up, the applicant's own landscape assessment concludes that the value of the site within its landscape is medium to high, and yet we have a recommendation on the table for approval. And that's what I'm struggling with. I'll welcome other members' thoughts on this before we vote. Thank you.
Mr. Ball, do you want to come back? Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you for that. As you say, how it works, there is a very sort of strict set of guidelines under the GLVA 3 for landscape visual impact assessments. How they usually work is when you're originally scoping the site, you'll do the zone of theoretic visibility, which will show up areas where there is potential. It's difficult to rely on those because they don't take into account, trees or hedgerows or sometimes buildings. So it's kind of a worst case scenario. And also it's done on any visibility. So some of those areas where it says there is potential for visibility, it might be the top 2% of a chimney. It might not be. So how, these nationally recognized guidelines, how they work is when you come off the zone, the ZTV, you basically then move to identifying some of the most key areas, and then you bring those forward with going there. Then it becomes a verified view. You have to use very specific cameras, specific lenses, etc., to sort of show that it absolutely is the view that's being seen from the human eye. So the applicant obviously looked at the wider area and then picked certain views that they thought were the key ones, or with the higher levels of impact, which are specialists. Consultee has done an independent review and agreed with the points. And I think it's worth noting that, as you say, from St. Lawrence. So again, this isn't a verified view, but essentially the view from St. Lawrence comes from that, if you can see it, that 25 sort of black circle down the bottom there, all the way across to the site. And then view 23 is this one here, right on that coastal walk, which is this one that we looked at earlier. And obviously this should essentially be disregarded, because what I've done there is I've zoomed in on the view, which then goes against all the LVIA guidelines, because the moment you zoom in, that's not what the naked eye sees. So I just wanted to do that just to give an idea of roughly where it may or may not lie in the tree line. And as I say, that red line is the sort of maximum theoretical. If the applicant built a 2 slash 2.5 story block the entire site, which we obviously wouldn't approve. It would fill that red line. But I thought it might be worth just picking up on when we look at the impacts, the way it works when you get to the level of effect is you look at multiple different things and then it goes on a sort of table, and that's where you find the effect. And so from that view 23, which is the lowest one we've got, the sensitivity is high because obviously, as you say, which would be the same probably with St. Lawrence, it's, you know, it's obviously an area where people are going to look around. But then you can see that the magnitude of effects, they've got small, moving to small to negligible after 15 years once the trees on site grow out. So what I would say, not being a professional, but obviously interpreting what we've been given and what we've been advised and understanding it to a degree, is if the effect from there is small, moving to small to negligible, then moving further across to this point, it's going to be even less of an effect at that point. It's going to have a lesser level of adverse impact.
May I just come back with one statement? It's a great photo, but mine's better, and I can see the site from the other side of the water with the sunlight. And because that side is facing south, a few solar panels on the roofs, and I think you're really going to see it. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Now I have Councillor Stamp, Lagan, Driver, Fitter and Whiffin. So we'll start with Councillor Stamp.
Thank you. A couple of questions really. I'd like the opinion of the officer here who has recommended this, if that's okay. I was surprised to see that there are 3 other sites there that are up for grabs, so to speak, or potential applications coming forward. In your opinion, which site is best? I'm quite shocked at the size of this. I don't go to Councillor Stevens' area very often, except for when we campaign to get you elected. And I was absolutely astounded at its beauty. I'm wondering why this council at the moment, I understand the pressures we're all under because of the national government statistics and saying what we've got to do, is why we keep wanting to destroy our coastal communities and our coastal views. We had an application at Burnham last night where, as far as I'm concerned, the decision that was taken was going to destroy one of the views from the river. It's happening again today. I totally agree with Councillor Stevens. So that you can answer that in a second, if that's okay with you. You said right at the beginning the bus service is now being enhanced or made better. Can you explain that a little bit more to me? Because we have an unsustainable bus service where I represent as a county councillor. And what I will say is if you don't have those facilities provided, all you create is mental health issues, loneliness, isolation. People don't want to go outside their houses, and you don't build a community. So that's an area of concern for me, that if you're not putting on a service where people are not reliant on their cars all the time. And to me, looking at this, it is. So that's the second one. The affordable units, what you've just said, and I totally understand exactly what you came from the first point you made. Normally the affordable units are built out at the end of a development, aren't they? We can always see that developers seem to want to push it back on the Section 106 agreements so they get their full whack of market homes and money coming in. It would be really nice that if we were going to have this many, and if officers and members are mind to approve, something can be done to make sure affordable units are delivered in a timely manner, and not for developers then to play games and hang loose with Section 106 agreements and move the goalposts, which we always see at this council, or seems to happen on more than one occasion. I actually feel this site is disproportionate, and I think actually asking for this many houses in that area will absolutely destroy what we all value over here. And I think, and I am going to say this because I think we all know that I do say things sometimes I shouldn't. Why are developers wanting to ruin what makes our district beautiful? All this speculative development coming forward because they know we haven't got a 5-year land supply. I'm sorry, it says more about them than what they're trying to provide here, because we're not sticking to an LDP, we're not doing strategic planning, we're not putting infrastructure and services behind these ad hoc decisions that we're having to make because we've been put under pressure. And I think I feel sorry for you officers, but at the moment, I'm in two minds about this. Unless I can hear somebody to turn around and say to me tonight, well, we have to do it, Councillor Stamp, I think you're ruining it. And one of the other sites, I think, may be more appropriate and not so large. Thank you.
Mr. Ball, before you step into a puddle, I'm warned that you can't comment on other applications that haven't been. So I'm sorry, Councillor Stamp, I don't think there'll be an answer to your first question, but Mr. Ball.
I made my point.
Yeah, no, exactly as said. You know, you've heard it a million times. We have to determine the application in front of us on the day on its material considerations and its merits. So, you know, we can't comment on whether any site is preferential. What we've done, and if you want my opinion, you know, the officer's report is my opinion. You know, that's what we're bringing forward to you. Otherwise, I wouldn't write it. So, there's a section in there about, you know, taking cumulative impact into account, at which point we're giving, you know, very limited to no weight to these other applications, because who knows whether they'll get approval, let alone be built out. So yeah, can't comment on that, as you say. The bus services. So essentially, that contribution, it's a contribution that has been used. I've seen on quite a few applications that comes from county highways. And it essentially buys. I've just brought up their email to me just to clarify it. It buys one bus service Monday to Saturday for a year, which is the 450,000. It's 150,000 for 1 year. So basically, it buys it for 3 years, and then it also, that contribution will buy a Sunday bus service for a 5-year period. And they essentially say that's the period that it takes to basically make a route financially viable, at which point it can operate itself. So that's what they're recommending is to add a bus service Monday to Saturday, and then.
Can I ask? Is that one trip?
I believe so. That's what it would be, right? I'll come back to you on that, but I think that's essentially what it is. But I mean, obviously we're guided by county highways, and they're determining that is sufficient to accommodate the development. I mean, what you've got to think is it's not necessarily that obligation is there to basically offset the impact of the development. So it's not necessarily, if we were to go above and beyond to request a higher level of bus service, you know, quite often there was an appeal I think we had recently in Clark's, I think it was, where the developer had proposed a very regular bus service, and then, albeit there was a far smaller site, but then it was determined by an inspector at appeal that actually it wasn't reasonably scaled to the development to address the impact of the development, and he didn't even take it into account. So essentially they have to propose something that offsets their impact, and that's what highways deem to be a sufficient improvement to bus services. And as I say, I've seen that on quite a few other of the applications we've got, where I think that's been deemed to be acceptable. So that's what it brings. On the isolation, yeah, I do. I think it was mentioned by the parish. You know, there will be some reliance on cars to an aspect for certain services. Of course, if you want to go to a supermarket, you know, you'll be having to use your car. I think we obviously have a sort of an accepted level of sustainability that's, you know, been whittled out in committees here, been through inspectors, and there are a whole host of amenities within Tollesbury that lead us to the point of considering it to be a sustainable development. Notwithstanding, there will be car trips for certain services, as there are in many. You know, I live in Zone 3 London. I have to get into a car to go to a big supermarket. But in terms of, you were saying the isolation can bring around, you know, issues with mental health and things. You know, I can't overstate how much open space is being brought forward on this site. And, you know, they have a whole host of facilities within walking distance to the primary school, shops, you know, some amenities there. And not only that, they have, you know, a huge circular walking route, dog areas, allotments, I think 4 local areas of play, plus 1 local equipped area of play, and then the informal area, which I assume would be football pitches or, you know, general green space. So there's a lot of space on the site for them to access, you know, external amenity space and also the services within the village. In terms of on the very last question, were you saying, I couldn't quite hear, were you saying about the larger homes coming forward sooner or later, or just the affordable housing?
was actually asking about the affordable housing.
Okay.
Can that be delivered in a better way? Because normally developers want to build great big houses and flog it to get the money in before they build in for the affordable for normal people.
So obviously we look for it to be mixed and balanced communities, pepper potting. So because we don't have a layout at this stage, that would be, if members did grant permission, that would come at reserve matter stage. At that point, through Section 106 obligation for the affordable housing scheme, that part of that would be a site-wide plan showing the location of units, and then at reserve matters, we'd know what size the units are, where they are, whether they're intermediate, whether they're affordable rent. And then obviously, the development is going to come forward in a sort of sensible manner rather than leaving holes. And then also it's the sort of standard planning obligation that we use here in a lot of places is not to permit occupation of more than 75% of the open market dwellings before all the affordable housing units have been constructed and completed and transferred to a registered provider or nominated by the council. So they can build out to 75%, but at that point that kicks in where all of the affordable needs to be built out. And there's a large portion of the site is obviously affordable. So you can assume they're going to come through. And on these sites you usually see them come through, and that is the standard obligation that's been applied to all the other large housing sites.
Thank you, Mr. Ball. Councillor Lagan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Everything that Councillor Stevens says, I concur with that. I read the report, and thank you for the report, because there's a lot in there to be able to consider and look at the pros and look at the cons. So I appreciate the depth of that. It's sort of in summary, you have a settlement boundary for a reason. So we set a settlement boundary. So we've got a developer who says, because of an algorithm change that the government made, we no longer have a 5-year housing land supply. So then we go on to tilt and balance. And if I look just at the planning balance slide that you were kind enough to put in the pack, the first thing that sticks out to me is it's located outside the settlement boundary. So that's quite heavy for me. Built form on a greenfield site, major moderate adverse landscape, major moderate. Then it up to major moderate adverse visual effects, major moderate. They're big definitions and big terms. The loss of 18 hectares of agricultural land, that concerns me too. Low level of less than substantial harm to Prentice Hall. That's probably the harm that doesn't, I'm sorry whoever lives in there, but doesn't impact me as much as what the others are. And then I go and look at the benefits, houses, 200 homes, including 40% for affordable. We've got applications coming at us. I don't know, Councillor Fittick will probably be able to tell us how many houses are yet to be built up. So we've probably got an enormous amount of numbers there. New communal open space, is that a benefit? We've got it there already. Economic job creation, so migrant workers will be coming in, and use of local facilities. I don't see that as a benefit, if I'm really honest with you. An environmental, your creation of a 10-acre green infrastructure, and your biodegradable on-site net gain and improvement to pedestrian links. If I had a set of scales and I was putting a weight on for each one, I'd go for the harms. So I'm concerned about this. I don't feel like I could support it in its current format. And also, what also worries me is I've sat in this chamber for 7 long years, and I've always said when it comes, if this gets voted on as the will of the members, I'll lay you a tenner. We get a lovely CGI, lovely built out CGI image, and it will have one racing bike, 2 people walking along holding hands, and 1 car. I want to see it on bin day, right, when all the cars are parked up in there. And my final comment is I'm flabbergasted that highways haven't raised an objection to this because of where it is. So yeah, there's for me on the balance, which as Mr. Johnson has always taught me I have to look at, I'm very much erring on the side of not supporting it, and I'll lay my cards on the table because of the information that's there, because of the quality of the report. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dragon. Councillor Driver.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of concerns about this, but I actually just want to home in on one, which is about the biodiversity gain of 49.15%, because at one level, you might argue a very big tick. But I do question that somewhat, because actually, what is created is a country park in the country. So actually, a line has been drawn round the site to the west, and that is deemed to be a country park, which actually is in the middle of the countryside anyway. I do question as well, when I see these, about who's going to be actually maintaining it. Because sitting within this site is a very large country park, which actually presumably is going to be maintained by the residents who move into the area, who will be paying some rent or a management fee for managing the whole site, including this country park. And I presume that that is what's on the cards here. And we've seen time and time again other developments where there is a large amount of green space, which at the time when it's planted out doesn't look too bad, and within a couple of years you're looking at scrubland because actually it's the wrong sort of planting in the wrong sort of place, and it's not actually sustainable. And actually we've got a situation now where we've got big developments which are coming near to the end of their development, where actually the residents are very unhappy with the service that they're getting, because actually what they were expecting and what they were being sold can't be actually maintained. So I have a concern about this 49.15% net gain, biodiversity net gain. If you turn half the site into a park, then actually at one level it's quite easy to get a net gain as a consequence of that. But I do question whether actually that's the way to do it when you're creating a park in open countryside anyway, where people could walk whether you had this or not. And I question whether actually the residents realise that half the site is going to be paid for by management fees that they're going to be charged in order to support this very large green space. Thank you.
Mr. Bull, can you respond?
Do you want me to come back on the first set of points?
By all means, yes, please.
And then go, is that, yeah? Agriculture, essentially, I mean, the amount of agricultural land being lost is below a threshold that Natural England would comment on. I know it's a large site, but they essentially look at the total we have across the wider area. And essentially, they won't even comment on this amount being lost. And I've been watching the appeal decisions coming in, and was it limited weight, I think? Was it limited that I gave in that? Yeah, so that was taken from a few other appeal decisions that we've received recently, where they give limited weight to it, and they just note the total amount we have within the district. So yeah, that's where that's informed from. And you know, this is grade 3. It could be 3A, it could be 3B. The applicant did notify me earlier today that they have done an agricultural land classification report, and they're saying I think it's 92%, they're saying 3B, which is moderate, which isn't best and most versatile land. So that sort of strips away a lot of the concerns with losing that. I haven't gone through that document before committee, so I'd probably say don't take that into consideration. But you know, it's in the, I think 90% of how much of our district, and then a lot of Essex is within that grade 3. So essentially that's the view inspectors take, and you know what I'm taking. Settlement boundary, you know, agreed with you on that one, but the 5-year housing land supply, again, you know, inspectors give limited weight to being outside the boundary. But then you're right in terms of we're still looking at the landscape impacts and the visual impacts of that, and I'm not trying to downplay those. I've said in the report that it is a fairly serious level of harm to visual receptors and to the landscape. It's just that you need to put it all in the balance, and you know, if you take, there are a lot of significant benefits coming forward, and you know, take them Lord, it's too hot. Cumulatively, mouth is so dry. Then you know that is substantial weight cumulatively. So even if you know someone were to judge that the landscape impacts and all the others amounted to substantial on that side, because we're in this tilted balance scenario, you know, depending where you are, you're probably coming to the conclusion that it doesn't significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the application. I appreciate you're saying, you know, we're in this situation nationally, and that's where we are, and that's unfortunately how we have to assess these applications now. Highways, the applicant submitted a transport assessment. I think it's very sort of low, negligible to low impact on the highway. I think the worst impact is a junction actually in Tollesbury and Darcy, and I think it's they basically look at it at 2030, giving time for development to sort of be built out, and then they factor in general increases over time. And I think it's only about an 11-second delay in peak times to one junction, so quite a low level of impact there, and that's why highways haven't objected on that. And sorry, going on to your points, BNG, yeah, I guess it's not a park. I suppose it's one of those things that it might look like grass to grass, but it's not really providing grass. It's providing biodiversity and net gain, which is outside of that. So I mentioned earlier, there's benefits of having a park to walk around, etc. But then a lot of what comes into that is the BNG stuff itself. So the existing site is, I can't remember off the top of my head, but probably moderate or poor grassland, which has very limited benefits to habitats and animals, insects. So what's being done now is really boosting up the type of on-site landscape to really help habitats and animals and bring in higher quality landscapes in terms of BNG. So it kind of sits outside of the park side of things separately. However, it's still a park, and you're right, there would be a management company. We've got a Section 106 obligation requiring that. It would be in contracts when people were looking at houses. I appreciate there are a lot of areas in the country that have had spiraling contracts. It's not a planning consideration at this stage, and that would be for people to consider when they're looking at buying houses. But unfortunately, we can't give any weight to that. But yes, it would be paid for by the 200 dwellings on site. And then, another one you were saying about the upkeep of the land. What we have as a sort of more of a benefit now with some of these new ones coming in from the mandatory BNG is that they're tied into a 30-year plan, habitat management and monitoring plan, and various other obligations where they have to send in reports to the council. So, and that's tied to the habitat regulations as well, which can get quite strict if you don't abide by those. So we have that kind of extra security where they're going to have to keep this in good condition in order to provide that BNG and demonstrate that they're keeping that level of BNG, which in turn will keep the land better better kept in general. I think that was everything.
Thank you. Councillor Fittock.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, first I'd like to start by saying I hate departing from plan. I mean, we have a local development plan for a very, very good reason. However, the situation that we find ourselves in is our plan is out of date. So the policies that are most important to that local development plan, such as settlement boundaries, are out of date. I've just spent 6 days in an appeal, talking about all of these matters. Previous to that, I spent, I think, 1 or 2 days at a Glebe Meadows appeal. Previous to that time, a Latchton appeal, and in between another appeal at Latchton. And all the things that we're saying have been argued at these appeals. That we've got problems with this, we've got problems with that, we haven't got enough school places, we have highways are an issue, the GP is an issue. At the end of the day, and I've tried arguing it to the best of my ability, and the point of the matter is, unless we can prove that the mitigation proposed by Essex County Council, the Highways Agency are wrong, and the NHS won't provide the GP places, then as far as the system's concerned, there is capacity. So all of the stuff about bionet gain and things like these are all minor elements of the planning application. The thing that matters most is, can we or can we not demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply? And do we have a plan-led solution to enable us to obtain a 5-year housing land supply? The answer is no. The numbers got thrust on us overnight. We've not had a chance to plan for it, and we're in tilt. But when I look around us, Rochford are just about to go into tilt because they had because of the same thing. Chelmsford, it's occurred to them. Brentwood, it's happened to them. Harlow, the whole of the county is going to be in that situation. So what do we do about it? The only way that we're going to get out of the position of tilt is grant consents. And I don't like to say that that's a positive thing because it's not, but it's a fact. So we have a choice really. We can either refuse applications based on very low quality reasons that we can't defend, and then they go to appeal and they end up being approved by the inspector. Or we can try to make sure the developments that we are consenting to, if there isn't good reason for refusal, that we accept the fact that we can't just say no because we want to, because we're elected to. We have to do what's right, because the implications are, if we keep refusing applications that we haven't got really solid reasons for, that we can't win on appeal, all we're doing is kicking the can down the road. So at the moment, the developer says this will contribute to your 5-year housing land supply. Now look, I've just given evidence on this, and developments we've got outline consent on, Knowles Farm, that's told us in a pro forma that they're going to start in a couple of years. The appellant's trying to convince the inspector that they won't start for at least 5 years. It's not as simple as just saying, oh, the development's there, it's going to happen, so therefore it's private land supply. I know that's the carrot that we're given, but if the appellant was actually coming to us and challenging our 5-year housing land supply, he'd be arguing that many of the consents that we've got won't come forward in 5 years. So the point is that if there are developments that we can't find good reason, we're going to have to understand that we've got no choice, and we should be approving them. I mean, I get a bit upset about this affordable housing situation. I keep told them we're in crisis. Well, and there's 700 people on the register. Yeah, there's 728 on the register. 221 of them have an actual reasonable need for a property. The other 507 have no reasonable need. They don't require housing now. Yeah, when I look at the register of housing that we've got to build, we've got over 900 affordable houses yet to build. Yeah, I don't see that there's a crisis. Now, we keep telling ourselves there is. The numbers don't tell me there's a crisis. They tell us we're in good control. Developers are using that against us to say that we should grant consent because we're in a crisis. I don't see it. I mean, obviously, it's trying to convince me, but I've not heard any argument to say we're in crisis. The numbers just don't stack up that we are. But the point of the matter is that these things, to a planning inspector, the increase in land supply, the increase in affordable housing, are deemed to be a substantial benefit. Now, I can't honestly see any reason that we could put forward that would stand any chance of us defending. The last one I was at Maldon was, we said, oh, look, we're going to complain about the infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. And then when we sat down and thought, well, okay, well, what evidence are we going to actually provide for it as an expert witness? I mean, I'm fairly good at these things, right? I didn't know where to start. You can't. So we've just got to accept the fact that that's not an argument we can win. I do think that there was a problem with the 6 months. And I would also like to propose a slight amendment to that recommendation as well. In so much as, if we're going to have any benefit from a sentence granted, the S106 has to be agreed. The permission in principle is going to be very, very difficult to argue in a 5-year housing land supply. So we want it either built or not built very quickly so that we can move on from it. So whilst it says it's reducing it to 3 months, which I support fully, I'd also say that we would move the or longer time frame if agreed by the director. I don't know what the implications of that are, but I just think that then, as members, we're in control of the decision. We've said 3 months. I expect it to be 3 months, not 4 months, not 6 months, not 7 months, because they keep egging us along. If they can't agree on S106, we move on to the next applicant. It's as simple as that as far as I'm concerned. So I will support the officer's recommendation on item B, but I would propose, if I'm seconding, that we, and it's not a problem, that we change the wording to remove the or longer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Gerard.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback on the last part, and I totally agree with what Councillor Fittock said and the reasons for that. I would hope not to need to use the second part of longer if agreed with me. There are sometimes occasions I've had in the past where, for no fault of the applicant, the legal agreement has taken a fraction longer to get to that point. And it just gives you that little bit of breathing space that it could have been something on our side, it could have been something on the county council side, took longer, and you wouldn't want to inadvertently have to refuse an application because beyond the control of the applicant, something has slowed it down. if it helps with the committee, I think one could amend that recommendation so in consultation with the chair of district planning, just to do that. And I think we could certainly either through the minutes, through the informative, through the minutes, or as part of that recommendation, make it extremely clear to the applicant that this isn't an open door to however long you want, that it's very limited circumstances, and I'd only have the power in exceptional circumstances to do that with the chair. I just don't want to inadvertently create a situation where we're refusing something and then going to appeal for a matter of a couple of weeks because of something like that. So on that sort of basis, if members were going, I'm happy to tweak the recommendation. I'm recommending to the committee to keep the recommendation, but tweak it so it's a bit tighter to pick up the points of Councillor Fittock.
Thank you. Members, I've got 5 more, and I'm very conscious of the time. So I just plead with you, can we keep your comments succinct? And if you're just repeating what someone else has said, then perhaps we'll leave it as said. But Councillor Whiffin, you're next.
Sorry, I'll be really quick because mine has mostly been answered. It was just a question for the officer. Can you confirm that that actually is grade 3B and not 3A, that agricultural land? And if so, how was it confirmed?
So, like I was saying, I would say probably don't give weight to that. Essentially, we've had that survey submitted to us today. I haven't gone through it properly. So we can't know. So essentially what they do is they go through, they look at the quality of the soil, stones, they dig holes, check things like that, how things are growing on there. And then there's a, very specific set of bands where it goes into certain things. And yeah, 3B, 3A is literally the cut-off point for best and most versatile. So it's not helpful from a knowledge standpoint that on most of our land is in 3, and we don't know which way it goes. But I'm saying to you now, if it was either, the way inspectors have been looking at it is saying you've got so much grade 3, this loss is not given any more than limited harm.
Right, sorry. So I was just reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was just reading on here about the agricultural land consultation being triggered by the loss of more than 20 hectares of best and most versatile land. But that's 18 hectares. It's quite close. So are we saying there's no other sites in any other area that are better served than losing good agricultural land?
I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where you have to look at the site. We're looking at this site. We certainly can't sort of go down the route of saying there may be a better one somewhere else. We have to, an application's been made to us. We can't stop someone from making an application on a site. It's come in. We then have to look at it. So perhaps there is, perhaps there's not. Like I said, most of the green field in the entire district is 3, so it's probably a pretty similar scenario. And either way, like I said, being led by what inspectors are giving in terms of weight to similarly sized schemes, I'm giving it limited weight. And even if it did trigger that response from Natural England, quite often they don't object unless it's a very large area of land and a higher grade like 2 or 1 quite often as well.
Another quick one, sorry. Can we just confirm that Highways have actually visited that site to do their report and it's not another desktop survey?
Do you want to ask another question? I'll have a look, because I mean, I don't think we can know that, to be honest with you. I imagine they would have, and they know the area well. Sometimes they make reference to it in comments, but if it's not there, that doesn't necessarily mean they haven't. Yeah, so their comments say the Highway Authority has visited the site and assessed the information submitted, blah, 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 and then concluded that it's in line with national and local highway and transportation policy and safety criteria. So, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yes. It says the Highway Authority has visited the site and assessed the information. So, yeah.
Councillor Dodsley.
Thank you. I'll keep it brief. I agree with a lot of what's been said already this evening, and I'm very mindful of Councillor Fittock's comments because I obviously sat in that appeal with him, so I'm very, very aware of what needs to be demonstrated. That said, what I want to say is that I'm uncomfortable with the benefits of this development. I feel like really the only benefit I can see is the housing, as in contributing to the housing land supply, which I understand because that's a figure that's been set for us and we have to meet that, and I understand that. I don't value the environmental benefits that have been put forward in this report. I agree with what Councillor Driver said, you know, and what Councillor Stamp said too around the open spaces. I think that's really important. But just something I do want to raise, and I always like to read the public comments whenever we come to planning committees, and you know, 658 is no small number. And you know, lots of very similar comments made, but things like, you know, no GP spaces, busing kids across the district, limited public engagement, like that really concerns me. Lack of sufficient capacity for water supply, like that's the reality that the current residents are going to face, plus new residents if they move in, because the trouble they're going to have getting kids to school. And it worries me. There's just two other things I want to say. I was uncomfortable with the comment made about the housing register by the applicant and that potentially dealing with a problem. I feel like that was massively overplayed. And just something I want to say about the agricultural land. I appreciate at the minute it's been given limited weight in appeals, but I wonder at what point that will change. How many times do we have to keep chipping away at our agricultural land before someone says, oh, maybe that's too much now? So those are my concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Quick, really quick. If I blitz through, sorry, the B&G, I'm taking the weight from other decisions. You know, if they just provide the 10%, it's a very low amount of weight because they're just doing what is required of them. When they go above and beyond, we do give more weight to it. Again, I appreciate what you're saying, but you know, there's the walkable primary school, and then we secured the contributions to address the other facilities. But appreciate what you're saying. And then on the water, Anglian water, I know we had a lot of comments about capacity and also about E. coli in the discharge. But again, that's outside of planning. They've got a statutory duty to meet the needs of the development, and that's why I've not, you know, considered those elements.
Thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be very brief because everything's been said. A lot of the things that I would have raised have been said. But there's one small thing that it would be remiss of me not to say, and Mr. Johnson will probably already guess what it is. But Skylark mitigation strategy. I understand what the needs are, the benefits of the housing. I understand that most of us don't like this application for all the reasons that we don't like it. But we sugarcoat things too much. There's very little evidence that any skylark mitigation strategy will work and save those skylarks. They're a red listed species. The North Heybridge Garden Suburb was objected to by the RSPB originally. Strangely, all the names are and all the roads are named after nearly all the birds we've lost. But the skylarks particularly, there was huge concern from the residents. There was a buffer zone put around the woods. It's never been monitored. Is there anyone here that could tell me whether that, on our biggest development in the district, whether or not the skylark survived? I suspect you can't, because none of us know, and it's not monitored. So I think we do sugarcoat things. We do make out, oh yes, that's fine, we're going to be able to cope with this, but we're not. And biodiversity is important. Skylarks might seem like a really small thing, and in planning terms they are, but there is a knock-on effect with biodiversity, and for every species we lose others. And I just think it's really important that we don't sugarcoat things or pretend that they will be okay. So I'm just out of interest, what kind of strategy will you be looking for? Thank you.
No, yeah, great point, and fully agree. You know, it's protected species. I'm not trying to downplay the weight. Essentially, police services, our ecological advisor is saying it can be done by condition. They just wanted a draft outline to see the general sort of area and things like that. So the condition I've recommended. So, I mean, like you said, the mitigation measures would be essentially finding a better location for it to be implemented. I hear you, but I mean, there's a lot of space on the site. And the condition 39 that I drafted up and put in the report, so that condition needs to be discharged prior to commencement. So before they do anything, this has to be discharged. So even if we don't have an outline, and if they can't address this, they can't address this. And, you know, it's quite serious because it's protected species. So it's not something that can be let slide. So before they commence development, we'd need that mitigation strategy submitted. And then I've also put in the condition, so the on-site, off-site mitigation, because it can be acceptable for it to be off-site if they can find a local area that can provide it. And then also details of long-term management and mitigation and a timetable for implementation. So we would want to see something about the management that obviously that condition binds them to as well. And then it would be approved the condition reads it'd be approved in accordance with the approved mitigation if it was all acceptable and maintained as such. So the management and the monitoring is secured by the condition.
Thank you very much for that, Officer. But I will say I'd be very surprised if it ever is monitored. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Nick Spencer.
Thank you, Chair, and it will be very brief. The Parish Council referred to a community land trust and community-led housing developments, and how different this discussion would be if we were looking at a community-led housing project that had grown organically out of the village, had buy-in from the community and the parish. So I know this is not a planning consideration for tonight. If this were the time and place, I'd be asking officers, what are your views on community-led housing projects? Do you see them as being too small in scale to slay the beast of the 5-year housing land supply? Or is it something that we can really foster and encourage? Because, I know you want to probably move on for a vote, but I think this is a missed opportunity.
I think that would be something ideal for the planning working group to talk about. Councillor Spencer. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. I will stand up. I agree with so much of what's been said, and the site is not without its problems. But in the end, I'm afraid I have to agree with Councillor Fitter. We really don't have a choice. We can't refuse housing all over the district. We are obliged to find housing. And Tollesbury is not such a bad place to put it. It is one of the larger villages, and we can't target all the other ones. It's just not going to work. So, although it grieves me, I do find I have to support the officer's recommendation. I'm sorry.
Did you want to make a proposal? Members, is there Councillor Stevens? I do think we do need to move on because time is pressing.
We do. I just want to make the simple point that yes, we do have to adhere to policy. If we find that the harms outweigh the benefits, and we genuinely believe that the impact on the landscape, which is significant up on that chart, and that might not, if you say that and the 200 homes are of equal benefit and harm, all the other things on that identified benefits, communal open space we've already got, you can just knock them off. So yes, we do have to go with policy, but if we find the identified harms outweigh the identified benefits, then we're absolutely within our rights to refuse this application.
You are.
Thank you.
So in order to move to a vote, shall I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation to approve this with the conditions that's laid down by Mr. Ball? Is anybody prepared to second that? Mr. Jaggard.
Just for clarity,
yep.
Is that with the amendments we suggested to
yes,
the time scale for extending the period?
And the little tweaks to the conditions at the start of the...
Yeah.
Councillor Stills? Is that a second?
No, it's not. Which recommendation? Because there's two on the page.
Sorry, the recommendations, if I may help, is part A and B. So one is to grant, subject to the section, I'm paraphrasing here, so forgive me. One is to grant, subject to completion of satisfactory section 106 within a timely basis, and we covered that off. If the section 106 isn't completed in a timely basis, and therefore the harms which are identified aren't being mitigated through the section 106, then authority is granted to me to refuse on that basis, because the committee will have technically voted to approve and not voted to refuse. If we were ever challenged on a process matter, it's more of a process matter. It's implied in what we've done in the past, but it's more precise to set it out as it's set out on the papers. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Morgan. So we have a proposer and seconder. Members, do you want to show by a show of hands? All those in favour? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So that proposal has failed. Any abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, members. 4. So that.
No, sorry.
Mr. Jaggard.
So the current
I have
position.
a long paragraph to read out here, but I'm sure.
Oh,
you'll
right,
do it much
okay.
better. No, go for it.
So at the moment, the motion to grant planning permission hasn't been granted, hasn't been carried.
Now we need to know whether they're minded to refuse.
Yes, and what the reasons for refusal would be, and then, as indicated by my colleagues, we cannot make that final decision today.
No.
Because if this is partly, I think members are probably aware, a change came in earlier this year that if any scheme of more than 150 homes is, the committee is minded to refuse, any planning committee, then it has to be offered into the Secretary of State to be determined. So if members were made a positive decision to refuse, we cannot make that decision tonight. We have to offer it into the Secretary of State to be called in, who will then make the decision themselves instead of us, potentially.
So I'm going to be guided by you.
So-
Councillor Driver.
Just a clarification, so I understand that, and I was going to ask that question earlier.
Could you put your microphone on, please, John?
Apologies. What's the implication of that? So if this does go to the Secretary of State, is there a future implication as to how we might be viewed given that?
Are you referring to whether or not, if that gets approved, it goes against our appeal performance and we have the risk of our planning powers being taken away? I haven't seen, this is a new thing brought in, so I don't have the answer to that one, I'm afraid. And I think we're watching this space, but the Secretary of State may, it's not beyond the realms of reasonableness to think the Secretary of State may consider that, and given where we are on the 9.6% against 10, there is a potential that it might push us into the boundaries where the Secretary of State may take away our planning powers.
Councillor Paula-Spencer.
Thank you. Can we take the vote again? Because my hand actually went up twice and I was trying to alert you with the abstentions that you hadn't counted my vote the first time. Sorry, can I just be sure? Because if we can do that, I'd rather we did.
No harm in making sure. All those in favour of the proposal to accept
the officer's recommendation as proposed with the amendment to suggested and the amendments to the conditions in the update at the beginning of the committee presentation.
So that's A with B as a proviso.
It would be taking the two officer recommendations, recommendation A and B, together as one.
Together, as a recommendation. Members, let's just do that again, just to be sure. Please show if you are in favour of that proposal. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's 8-4. Those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Abstentions? 1, and I've abstained, of course. 2, 3. So we are still refusing.
Sorry, Chair. We haven't approved.
No.
We haven't refused either.
No.
So the decision has to be taken.
That has failed.
Yes. So the decision of the council how to handle the application in front of us.
Officers, I'm in your hands. I'm not
Well,
sure
I guess
of the,
members will have to consider, and there may be a counter proposal to refuse the application, but to refuse the application, members will have to consider what the valid reasons for refusal are, and obviously, if the application was refused, who would defend the application at a future public inquiry if that was to happen, or if there was. I don't think that's the case because I didn't hear anything apart from conversations about skylarks and agricultural land, whether members thought a deferral to get more information on something would allow them to make a positive recommendation. But I didn't hear that from the committee. So
no.
At the moment, all that the committee has done is not made a positive recommendation to approve the scheme in front of us. So we still have a live scheme in front of us.
Okay. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Just to clarify that point, that situation, is the applicant now in a position that he would be able to make an appeal for non-determination on the fact that we haven't come to a yes or no decision?
I will pass the question down to my Mr. Ball. I'm not sure what is the extension of time deadline on that one.
Yes, they can. Yeah, so they've kept that as an option, and I think there are some constraints on the option on the land. So, yes, basically.
So the council now has the threat of an appeal coming against it straight away. Is that right? Thank you.
Councillor Eunice Cyril Norman, sorry.
Yeah, I've got a lot of names. I won't tell you some of them.
They're all good. They're all good.
We've actually voted against it.
No.
Well, we've
No.
not to accept it. Right.
The proposal has not been
The
moved.
proposal has fallen.
Yes.
Right. Now, we have to give reasons for that, don't we?
Well, we're looking for a councillor.
I'm
we're looking
proposing.
for a proposal.
Yes.
With reasons for
Yes.
a reason
Well,
for refusal.
I'm proposing that we're refusing it on the fact that we believe in the area that we live, that it's against all the reasons why government would say that we weren't the right place to put them, to be perfectly honest. But however, I also think that we must make sure that we're doing that because we are not prepared to be made to pay money for what we believe in. I'm sorry, I'm not very good at this. People can put their heads in their hands and whatever on what I'm saying, but I think the time has come when this council, I mean, I understand what Councillor Fiddick said, and he's quite right, isn't he? We are being bulldozed into doing what we know to be right by giving our reason, because we are going to be told off for doing it. And I'm very, very angry as a socialist councillor here that my government, and I don't mind saying it, has brought this about, because I think that we need affordable housing. We need to have a 5-year whatever. But however, we are not prepared as a council to go against our principles that we are doing something that is detrimental to our district. Thank you.
So we have Councillor Cyril Norman has proposed that we refuse this application. Is that seconded? Councillor Stevens. So we now have to have a show of hands to see how many members are minding. Councillor Fluker, you haven't spoken this evening.
So,
As Fiddick said, and what happened to Epping Forest District Council on the 15th of June, I propose that we have a recorded vote. Thank you.
So before members can vote on a refusal, we need to understand what the reasons for refusal will be.
Yep.
So before we get a seconder, I think we need to have a clear reason for refusal what that would be, we can help with some work around the words, but at the moment, obviously, the officer's report weighed up the balances and concluded that we should, or recommended that permission should be granted. That wasn't carried, but we need to know what the reasons for refusal would be, and at the same time, which members feel they would be able to defend it at a public inquiry in the same way that Councillor Whittaker's just set out was the last 2 weeks.
Members, reasons for refusal, Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, I would be willing to speak at the appeal that I have no doubt there will be. I believe that the harms outweigh the benefits for the reasons I put forward earlier, that include that the landscape has a high to medium level of sensitivity to the changes that this development would bring, that the impacts on people using footpath 8 is a major to moderate impact, because there's no evidence that there is no harm to the visible landscape from the river and the southern shore of the Blackwater. That hasn't been proven. Because officers and the developer both found that the magnitude of the effects on the landscape cannot be mitigated by planting below a major to moderate level. Because the local character assessment of Tollesbury coastal farmland states that the objectives for this area are to conserve and restore the landscape, and this development doesn't do that, and that we should conserve and enhance the landscape setting of Tollesbury and other villages, and this development doesn't do that. Because the local character assessment of the Tollesbury coastal farmland also states the open nature of the skyline of the coastal farmland is visually sensitive, including to new development, and this area is considered to display a moderate to high sensitivity to change, and this certainly would bring a change. So those would be my reasons. Thank you.
Chair, it will need to be significantly demonstrated.
Please, Mr. Chair. Sorry,
Please take this in the best possible way. Councillor Stevens said she would be willing to speak at a public inquiry. I think, and I please take this in the right way, members, because it will come across as bullying. Public inquiries aren't where you turn up and speak. Public inquiries are where you sit in the seat and you're cross-examined by an expert landscape witness on the other side, who will challenge you on everything you say, who will ask you to justify it with your qualifications. And yes, we can try to get support, but in 2 recent cases, we have tried to get expert support on different things, and people have been unwilling to support us. I'm trying to give you the positive advice as best I can, and warn you of the risks around this, because those matters you raise are matters which are the landscape impact. But as both members and my officer colleagues have said, series of planning appeals have given significant weight to the need for more homes, as Councillor Siddle Norman said. The governance figures are large. No council has been able to keep up, and that will be factored into the weight that any planning inspector has. And it isn't a friendly place when you're being cross-examined by a KC. And I think I need to warn you in the strongest terms, that doesn't sound a strong case, I'm afraid.
Councillor Fisher, can you put your mic on?
If I can help, Chair, I mean, I think what Mr. Jagger is saying is that the reasons for refusals have to be defended, and when it's technical matters, by an expert witness, and there will be a requirement for a proof of evidence against their proof of evidence, and our expert witness would be the person that did the, if you like, visual impact assessment. that didn't necessarily regard it as substantial harm that was significant enough to end up with refusal for the application. So the expert witness, as we found out at Southminster, isn't going to be able to speak on our behalf unless he thinks there is a reason to speak, which we won't. So I think the reason might have a problem because we won't be able to find an expert witness, and then for when we go to the appeal, to the hearing, we'll have to refuse it on barrister advice because we haven't got an expert witness to defend it.
Councillor Fluker?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Do you know, this is, we've done a lot of these appeals now, Councillor Fittick and myself, and we seem to get ourselves in an absolute muddle, and I can't help thinking that the planning process itself is heavily weighed in favour of the applicant. When officers know that members are very passionate about a planning application, and they are going to, the members are going to go on a subjective issue to oppose an application, and that's all you can do. You can't go policy. This is policy compliant. You can only go subjective. At that stage, would it not be in the best interest of everybody that we appointed a landscape consultant then as part of the planning process, so we could go to the market and we could say, look, can we defend this? Yeah, can you advise us before we get in this chamber? Because if we carry on, we won't be coming in this chamber anymore to discuss and decide planning applications. It's happened overnight at Epping Forest, and I understand that we are incredibly close to losing the right to determine planning applications. That's why I want a recorded vote.
Mr. Jaggard.
Just to reassure you. Yeah, no, that's okay. Just to reassure you, as part of, because landscape is a detailed area and specific area, we do use an expert to advise us on this scheme before that. So the expert has already looked at this scheme, which helped to inform the officer's report. His name is Nigel Cowling. You may have come across him in different places. So we have already used an expert, and his conclusions fed into the report and the planning balance that Mr. Bull has written in his report.
If I just come back briefly, I think it would be very useful moving forward that when this happens, maybe, I appreciate there's a confidentiality issue, and of course what you've just said leaves us now in a very difficult position if this were to progress to appeal, because our landscape consultant has said it's basically not defendable. But I think it would be useful going forward if members could have sight of those reports. Thank you.
Councillor Stevens?
Thank you. So members have been asked which of us would be prepared to step forward and defend this at appeal. Clearly none of us is the qualification that Mr. Jaggard says that we need, and I certainly put myself in that camp, so I'm not quite clear what we're being asked for. Can you clarify, please? Thank you.
Well, I'm trying to avoid a constitutional break, because I don't think that's helpful, because I think we could come back in a month's time and have the same debate all over again. Obviously, as the officer organisation, and I again mean that in the most possible way, we looked at the scheme as professional planners who have been in the industry quite a lot of years combined, and the recommendation was, for all the reasons set out in the balance there, it's not a there's no harm, there are harms. We recommended approval for the scheme. And we think we have actually worked quite hard with the applicant to get the best scheme possible. It isn't just, I always say, it isn't 200 houses, it's a number like widgets, it's a homes. Can we build a community and a nice place to live, and somewhere we can come back and be proud of in the future, despite the fact it was an agricultural land first. However, members didn't vote for that in a positive way tonight, and therefore there isn't a positive recommendation, which then means either the application stays undetermined and the applicant, if I was them, is likely to go for an appeal on non-determination, or members want to consider a reason for refusal which is defendable at a public inquiry. And I think where we are, and again, I'm let me use that phrase, I'm being bad cop for the moment, so forgive me. We haven't been hugely successful at some appeals, and we need to be, my role is to be honest with you in terms of what the next steps look like, how successful in officer terms we think an appeal would be, and the wider implications of if we go over 10% that we might lose our planning powers. So therefore we need to have really clear reasons for refusal which members feel confident of being able to defend at an appeal. Otherwise we risk going through a process and the implications, as I said, and we've seen it in places like Epping down the road, losing their planning powers. Chair.
Can I make one brief point?
By all means.
A little helpful. I'll be
Quick. Essentially, sort of like brass tacks of where you're at is, like I was saying, because, you know, government have done what they've done, we've lost our 5-year housing land supply. So that bottom bit, it's not a direct quote, but the bottom bit from the NPPF. So essentially, if I reword it slightly, the harms have to be significantly and demonstrably worse than the benefits. So when it comes down to that sort of balance, and when you're looking at the actual just facts and figures of it all, I guess what you'd have to be doing if you did want to go, you know, refuse and go to appeal on this is either you're saying everything in the green, the benefits, doesn't amount to cumulatively substantial benefits, which I would be wary about doing with, you know, 200 houses, policy compliant, affordable housing. You know, that to me, that looks like very much substantial benefits of the scheme. So you go across to the other side, so you need significantly and demonstrably more weight on the negative side. So you might disagree on landscape, which, you know, you clearly do. Maybe you give substantial weight to that as a harm. At that point, with the other sort of limited levels of harm, which, you know, obviously this is just us trying to advise you, I wouldn't particularly move any of those higher, especially above moderate. But if you bundle all that together, even if you move those to moderate and you move landscape to substantial, you've got substantial. So now you've got substantial. That's not significant and demonstrably outweighed. If you want to go to very substantial harm and landscaping, that's like a really high level of landscaping and view. Sorry, if you bundle them both together, very substantial is a really high bar. So if you wanted to weight it the other way to sort of say we think it's unbalanced that way, then we're sort of really leaning into the landscaping and visual impact. That's kind of like where the maths of it, I guess, is. Sorry.
Before I go to Councillor Lagan, we have had a proposal to agree with the recommendation of the officers. That has failed, and we now seem to be debating it to try and vote again until members agree. Now, I'm concerned that we can't keep putting the original proposal. We have a proposal from Councillor Siddle-Norman, seconded by Councillor Stevens. Now, I'm in a position, I'm in a concern that we now need to ask members, are they minded to agree with that proposal? And I know you said you don't want to institute the constitutional break, but unfortunately, I think the way that this meeting or this debate has gone, that's where we are, Mr. Jagger. Now,
Yes,
Councillor Lagan, Councillor has been waving his arm.
Just a really tiny quick one. Councillor Fitzick actually made a proposal. So those recommendations we voted from, they've failed. That doesn't mean to say that we can't vote an amended recommendation.
Yes.
Because Councillor Fitzick made a recommendation earlier on. There was just a slight adjustment for what these recommendations were. So if Councillor Fitzick can go back onto what those recommendations were,
with an alternative,
as an alternative, then that can be voted on. Because I think what's happened is we've been put in a corner by a system that absolutely stinks.
Yes.
So
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I thought Councillor Fitzick's proposal had been taken into account.
I think it was amended, although.
In which case, Mr. Chair, I think your sum up of the situation is entirely correct, in that we must now vote on Councillor Siddle-Norman's proposal, and if the fact that there isn't any particular reason put forward as to why that is to be refused, that's the way it is. Well, I don't think we can do anything else.
I don't think that's right. In order to, we need reasons for refusal before we take a vote. We also need to see whether members are minded to vote in favour of that, and then we institute the constitutional break. That's how.
I think reasons for refusal have been put forward.
Well,
in terms of
Mr. Jaggard is saying they will not hold enough.
Well, I don't think that's necessarily the point. The point is they have been there and they've got to be voted upon. And I believe we've put ourselves into a bit of a difficult situation. Of that, there's no doubt.
If I may help, Chair, and I think the comments have been very helpful. I guess I was trying to refine the reasons for refusal before the vote, but I do agree with the comments. A reason for refusal was moved by Councillor Siddle Norman. I think a range of landscape reasons, probably as one landscape reason, but with elements to it, were put forward by Councillor Stevens, who probably second the motion.
Yes.
So therefore, I think you have a motion to consider. This was probably part of debating that one, and then I think everyone is correct. You can move to a vote on that recommendation.
But my understanding is, if members are minded to vote for refusal, I have to ask to see how many there are, and then we institute the constitutional break clause.
I think there's a couple of options for when you trigger it,
Okay,
but I think
constitutional break always frightens me. I have to say whether I'm sitting there or whether I'm sitting here.
I'll take the vote on the motion.
Councillor Fittock, you wanted to speak.
I think the problem is it's been members of mine refuse, but we're not really clear about the reason why we're minded to refuse. And you can't have a refusal and go to appeal without knowing what you refused it for. You can't have reasons that you can't defend. I can tell you the ones that you can't defend. There's infrastructure, visual impact, because it's already been agreed by the expert witness there isn't substantial harm. So it's what's left. You've got policy SA, settlement boundaries. Well, we know that carries limited weight every time we go to appeal. We're told it carries limited weight. So I think the constitutional break should be for members to come up with a reason that makes sense, that we can defend, and then go from there. Because at the moment, we sort of don't like it, but we want to refuse it, but we don't know why, because we don't know the policy or the reason why it's not going to work, is it?
No.
So I think that there's couple of options. I think you could vote on, because something which has been made as a motion, we could try to trigger a constitutional break to go away and come back, but I'm not sure that's there. Equally, a third option is if members didn't carry if the reason for refusal or the refusal based on that refusal wasn't carried either, then we still have an undetermined application. There is an option which is Councillor Lagan's one, which is that actually one could come back with a slightly different recommendation to approve, with a different recommendation, and look at that at a separate one if that gave a chance to have an ongoing dialogue outside this council chamber about it. So if you voted on this one reason for refusal and that wasn't carried, then I think you're right. Let's trigger a constitutional break at that moment and reflect where we are and how we bring this item back at a future date, because I'm not sure we're going to get much further tonight. But if it is refused tonight on that reason...
Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is we should only have a show of hands to see whether members are minded to support Councillor Siddle Norman's recommendation that we refuse.
For the reasons set out.
Pardon?
For
those reasons.
Yeah.
It's if we vote on it, then we can't institute the constitutional right. We can only do it if we are minded to.
Sorry, can
That's
I
my
can I just
understanding.
ask if we are going to take that approach, I think we do need a little bit more clarity, and I think the members also need a little bit more clarity just in terms of what are the reasons for refusal.
Well,
we have heard landscape.
I think that was it.
And that may just be it. If members are clear that it's just landscaping,
Members,
then we can move to.
Could I suggest, because right at the very beginning I said after each item we're going to have a hydration break. We've been going for nearly 2 hours. May I suggest that we have a 10-minute adjournment, for officers to consider and just to give the opportunity for a rest and a comfort break. So I will adjourn for 10 minutes. We're back at 22. Welcome back, members. Before we restart, can I just confirm that we are unlikely to get to items 2 and 3 because we have officers here that are waiting for those. So, Mr. Chair, we will need to reconvene to cover those 2 items. And we will carry on with our discussion. Now, as I see it at the moment, we have a proposal to refuse by Councillor Siddle-Norman and perhaps an opportunity to consider another proposal along the lines that Councillor Fittock said, that there is a 3-month deadline with no wriggle room. Now, we haven't actually voted on that because we voted on the recommendation within the report, but if Councillor Siddle-Norman is prepared to withdraw her proposal and Councillor Stevens agrees with that as seconder, we could have the opportunity of taking another proposal from Councillor Fittock.
Yes, I've decided that I will withdraw. Not that I think that I disagree with anything I said, but I feel that the need is for Councillor Fittock's proposal to be put forward instead of mine. Thank you.
Do you agree with that, Councillor Stevens?
Am I allowed to say no? I feel like we've been boxed into a corner. My understanding of this yesterday was that the one aspect that could be considered to outweigh the benefits was the landscape, the visual impact, which is what I've spoken about tonight. Mm-hmm. If that's changed overnight, then I'm not quite clear why. That seems extraordinary that it would change overnight. So I know what everyone wants me to say, but I don't understand what's changed.
Mr. Ball.
Sorry, obviously we had a discussion yesterday and you posed a few questions in the lead up. And essentially I think what the conversation was you were asking about sort of, I guess, what I took that to be sort of legitimate reasons for refusal, or something that maybe there is an element of subjectivity and it's not something that is an absolute yes or no. And I was sort of looking at avoidance of costs and things like that. I mean, obviously my report's been written the way it is in the presentation. I do think that the benefits outweigh the harms, including landscape, which is by far the biggest harm. But I think I was saying that if you were to go down a route, that seems, something that can be discussed. However, I think what we're saying as well is we don't think it is a refusal based on that. It's just that you had a few questions about other things, and I was sort of saying things like, we've seen what's happened at appeal sometimes if we go against county highways without any updated information presented to committee and things like that. So I think I hope that that's what was understood. But essentially, it's if you were to go down that route for refusal, then it's not something that is like absolutely flying in the face of the evidence in front of us. Although I do think that it goes against the evidence in front of us, if that makes sense.
I'm not sure. I expect members won't vote for this, but I would like to take Councillor Siddle-Norman's proposal and make that my proposal and see if anyone would second it, please. Thank you.
Is that seconded? It's not seconded. So that has failed. Councillor Fittock, would you like to restate your proposal?
So I read out the full recommendation. So if I read out the full recommendation, there's no confusion for members, is there? Basically, the recommendation is recommendation date: approve and delegate the authority to the Director of Place Planning and Growth to grant permission, subject to the applicant entering into a legal agreement pursuant to Section S106 of the Town and Country Plan Act 1990, as amended to secure planning obligations subject to conditions as detailed in Section 8.
Could you speak closer to your
and finalising the planning conditions as set out in Section 8. And the recommendation B, where I was recommending the change, was if the Section 106 agreement is not fully completed within 6 months of the date of the District Planning Committee, within 3 months of the date of the District Planning Committee, then refuse the planning application under delegated powers, subject to referral to the Secretary of State. So basically what I'm taking out there is the flexibility for the 3 months to be longer at the discretion of the Director of Planning, Place and Growth, so that the members' will is absolute in terms of 3 months.
Thank you, Councillor Whittaker. Is that proposal seconded? Councillor Morgan has seconded it. Members, can I have a show of hands of those in favour of that proposal? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 4. Those against? 1, 2, 3. Those abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that has carried. Thank you, members. A healthy debate, difficult, difficult circumstances, but I thank you, and thank you, officers. It's not been an easy evening for any of us. Temperature included. Now, members, we're obviously not going to cover items 6 and 7. Therefore, I need to adjourn this meeting, and we will arrange a meeting probably about 6:30 in the morning. Is that suitable? At a future date, I'm sure. Thank you very much for your time. Safe journey home. Good night.